I really like that you talk about wet plate collodion as like photography 1.0. So what is it?
Yeah, I think photography for me is really interesting because it's an idea, right, that just like bubbled up in the collective consciousness, and there were a lot of different people using different recipes in order to get an image to stick onto a plate, essentially. And yeah, collodion's almost like a syrup consistency liquid, and you pour it on a plate, and the plate gets sensitized in a silver bath. So it's a silver bath of silver nitrate, and that makes it light sensitive. So when you pull it out of the silver bath, you put the plate into a light box, and then you can bring it to your camera and you can shoot it. And you have to shoot the plate, you develop it and fix it all while the plate is wet. So once it starts, it becomes like a timed process. So that was like one of the first iterations of it, but one of the problems with that is that you always had to have your darkroom right next to you. So around the turn of the century, they developed dry plate, and then when you think about film is essentially a roll of little dry plates. So you can take them out, shoot them, and then take them to the lab and have them develop.
Yeah, there's this like history of photography that we know that's like really tied into the history of the sciences. So Anna Atkins was a photographer really early, made the very first photo book studying natural species in Britain and basically using this process called cyanotypes, where she would like place this natural like element on the paper, sort of expose it to the sun, and then it would leave like a silhouette or an imprint on the paper with this beautiful blue behind it. That was like the cyanotype look. And so there's always been this history between biology, the sciences, and photography, and they've been going together. And so I think for me, the origin of photography being hand in hand with science and art, the origin of GANs and AI also has that same kind of lineage of it's useful for doing research, it's useful for looking and thinking about the world in different ways, and it's also for allowing us to think about and see different things about our environment. And so for me, this show is looking at early photography, looking at early GANs, and making like a fusion or a synthesis of those two.
You know, when I got into wet plate, it was all of the things I loved. It was photography, it was painting, it was light, it was alchemy, it was chaos, it was magic. So I fell in love with it very quickly. And I really started to push this idea of the artifacting in the plates. The artifacts became the most beautiful part of it because when you look at some of these plates, they're organic patterning that you see in nature. You know, it could be a planet or a petri dish, and they have the same patterning and organic form in there, and that was really exciting to me.
It's the most analog photography technique. It's liquid, and so instead of trying to obscure and hide that, I think your process has been to emphasize that. I think the medium itself of these metal objects that the silver is visible, they're just this exquisite material that's completely unlike a digital print.
Yeah.
And the resolution that we get through the analog process is just extraordinary. And in this show, we have different kinds of work. You know, we have these small 4-inch by 5-inch metal plates that have this amazing physical quality and resolution. We have these larger plates in the primordial series that you develop a lot of new techniques for. And then we also have these enlargements, like high-resolution scans of those small plates, and those get blown up to a bigger like body size. And in those, we really see all of the liquid artifacts, all of the digital artifacts like working together, and they're really magnified. So what I'm so excited about the show is that we started this together in a way where it was an experiment. Like, let's combine what we both know really deeply. We didn't understand what each other did at that time, and we're getting to know that. And let's like get together and start making things and sort of see what comes out.
Yeah, the thing that was really energizing to me about your process was that we both come with very different skill sets, but I think that we both are asking the same questions in our work. And I see that, you know, the things that you do, I think there's a certain amount of listening to what either the data or, in my case, the chemistry is telling us. You know, there's novelty, there's randomness, there's chaos on certain levels. And it's setting up the opportunity to learn from what the environment is telling us.
I think what we're doing in these hybrid images is, I think the machine learning images, the GAN images, are the most digital images.
Yeah.
Like they are being synthesized through these models, and they're being generated. Actually, the reason I work with GANs rather than other kinds of AI machine learning models is because they have the latent space. So the latent space is basically the set of all possible images that can be generated from this trained model. And the way that you access that is through a matrix of numbers. And so basically I'm inputting a sequence of numbers, I'm getting an image out, that digital image is being synthesized, and then we're running that through this analog process. So I think it's like the most analog, the most digital sort of put together in a way where both of those are being emphasized and then fused together.
You know, what we both share is our work asking questions and not providing necessarily answers to people. I think when you put an image in front of somebody that tells them exactly how to feel, you know, it doesn't give them the space to experience it in their own emotional state. And I think that room for interpretation is really interesting.
Yeah, and I think the way that early photography and machine learning operates, it's so different from how we see and how we perceive the world. And I think that's of great interest too.
Well, the camera is built based on the eye, but machine learning is built based on the brain. So I think that in some of these ways, humans are always, whether consciously or unconsciously, trying to extend our own perception into the world. And I think that a lot of the things that we're doing currently in this show is testing things out for the first time and seeing where these things end up.
Yeah, what do you feel like we're doing in this show that's really unique, like something you've never done before or explored before?
One of the things, well, for this show specifically, scaling. You know, when you're working with gallons of chemicals instead of, you know, liters, it really changes the process, and also just the magnification of these images. A lot of the images that you provide are organic, they're earth-based, but when they're, you know, translated into this process, you have this removal from that into the digital and then back into the analog. So I think it provides the viewer with this step back from it where, you know, they're not sure which is digital and which is analog. And that to me is the way that things are going in the future, you know, like they're not apart from each other. I think humans too, we're not apart from our phones. We're not, you know, technology and humanity are interlinked in a very specific and very conscious way. And I think that these pieces do that as well, where it's seamless, where the analog and the digital meet each other in a seamless way.
I think the idea in the past that there was a difference between the virtual and the real is completely shattered now. And I mean, everything comes into here and everything gets fused here. It's all fluid and it's all continuous. For this show, it's a really different kind of show for me because most of the work exists as material artifacts that are framed on the wall. And so for some of the images in the show, like the technical images and the primordial images, they kind of start in my studio and they move into your studio, and that's like the final result. For the RGB technical images, they start in my studio, they go to yours, and they come back to mine. And so there's that cycle there. And then for the amplified technical images, they kind of are completely digital, and they never sort of enter into the wet plate world. And usually in my exhibitions, most things are projected on screen. It's like live, performative, generative software. And so for wet and saturated process, there's one piece that is projected large, that is running as live code. It feels very much like a video piece. And then all the other work are these artifacts. And I think starting digitally, if I want to be showing objects and artifacts, I want them to be sort of as material and analog as possible. And then I want to have the opposite. I want to have the digital images sort of there in conversation with those two. All the work in the show, like all the original images that are being generated through the trained GAN model, all come from one data set that I collected all the way back in 2018. And basically I was foraging in the Rocky Mountains, like near Aspen, Colorado. And in doing that, I was retracing the steps of Stan Brakhage. Stan Brakhage is an American experimental filmmaker. And he made these two films. One's called Mothlight, and the other's called The Garden of Earthly Delights. And I have just, ever since I saw those films, I've been just completely interested in them. And so in 2018, what I wanted to do was take the idea of those films, but I wanted to do them in a digital process. So like migrating them from the analog technology to the digital studio. And so I was like in the same biome that Brakhage was living when he collected all the plant materials for those films. And so I collected bags and bags of plant material. I took them into the studio and I scanned them really high resolution on a digital scanner. And all of those images became the source material for what I guess I call my like Colorado plant data set. And so that was the data that was trained on of this organic material from the Rockies, and all these images generate from that source material. And so the work's all coming from there, but then the other work in the show that we haven't really talked about is called the Earthly Delights Series 3. Like I've been iterating on this for a long time. And it is a projected work that is my imagination of what these Brakhage ideas, how they could evolve in the 21st century. And so it's an imaginary projector. The thing about an analog projector is that it's a very constrained machine. It's like presenting one frame at a time, always at 24 frames per second. The shutter opens and closes with the same rhythm. The images always appear one after another in the sequence that they are on the film. And so in software, I built this imagined projector, which can display the images in any sequence. It can display them at any frame rate. It can, rotate them, translate them, flip them around. And so for this piece, I have 2 minutes of 24 frame per second video rendered through the GAN, but the imagined projector is always presenting them in different permutations. And so it's like an infinite film being generated from this 2 minutes of linear film. That's that piece.
Nice work.
You too.
You did a great job.
You did too.
I feel more comfortable when you're here. If this was just me, I'd have been stressed. But I'm I'm just talking to Casey.